I'm going to demonstrate how to divide a round yoke cardigan into a body and sleeves to continue knitting underneath the armpit. This is the Spoke Cardigan by Kira K Designs, which is me. And I have knitted the yoke, I've measured the length is correct. The other prep work I've done is I have counted out the stitches that will be for the front and put a marker, counted out the stitches for the sleeve, another marker, and then repeated it on the other side. And I've set up for myself 2 stitch markers, which I'll be using where side seams would be, although this is a seamless sweater. And I've got 2 pieces of yarn. One of them is pre-threaded on a darning needle. These are going to be my stitch holders, and I like using scrap yarn for that because it keeps it very flexible and easy to try on. So to start, I'm doing a stripe sequence, and I did just make sure that I'm going to be doing this dividing row in my main color or the darker color because it'll be a little bit more subtle. It happened to work out that the measurement was perfect, but if I needed to have an extra row or skip a row, I probably would have done that just to have it look better. So I'm going to start by knitting my row until I get to my first marker. So these stitches are the stitches for my sweater front. And of course I dropped one. There we go. This part of a project where you either divide where you go from the yoke to the body, or if you're doing bottom up and join from the body and sleeves into the yoke. I have a different video on that showing on the Essential Cropped Cardi. It tends to be a little confusing for people because we are making a 3-dimensional shape, and sometimes it can be hard to know what that's gonna end up being like if you haven't done it before. So go slow, trust your pattern, make sure you do each step correctly, and don't worry about the big picture if it's not coming easily to you. All right, so here I am, I'm at my marker. These are the stitches that I've counted off my sweater front. Between this marker and the next marker are stitches for the sleeve, and I'm going to set those aside. So I'm going to take my darning needle that's threaded up with scrap yarn, and I want scrap yarn that's kind of close to the knitting needle size if you can. I'm going to slip these stitches purlwise from the knitting needle onto the darning needle, and if this needle's in your way, feel free to just pull that through so it kind of gets out of your workspace. So each one slips purlwise. I usually do them one at a time because if you're trying to get 2 or 3, you're more likely to split the yarn and it'll end up slowing you down in the long run. I'll kind of slide down here onto the yarn. The yarn's here just in case you're admiring them. My main color yarn is from Sincere Sheep. It's called Cormo Sport, and a beautiful dark green called Eldritch. And my contrast yarn, this is the ball of it, is from Yarn Hero. It's called Color Mix DK. So this is just 2 yarn sources, even though I've got stripes of various colors. Now I always suggest when you do this, double check your stitch counts because it's pretty easy to make a counting mistake, and you don't want to find that out when you finish your sweater and realize that one front is a lot narrower than the other. So I've reached my other marker. I'm going to pull all of my stitches through. I can take the marker off because it's going to fall in a second anyway. And I just take the 2 ends of my stitch holder yarn and tie them in a knot. And I like to do this loose kind of out near the ends so that there's a room for these stitches to expand, and I could even try this sweater on in a little bit and have room for my arm to fit in there. Now I need to cast on, and in this case I'm casting on 10 stitches, and I need to sort of bridge this gap. They're going to go across the underarm. You have options for what kind of cast on you want to do, but I'll show you what I like to do, which is a double twisted loop cast on. And to do that, we don't need to turn it. I'm just going to hold it as if I was going to knit some more. Yarn's in my left hand. I'm going to pick up the yarn and turn it so I have a twist, and then turn it once more. So I'm going to get this a little closer. I've got 2 twists in the yarn there, and I can see better. Got 2 twists here in the yarn, that's what we're looking for. And then I'm going to stick that onto my needle. I'm just going to change the framing a bit so you can see what I'm doing a little bit more clearly. So, twist the yarn, got 1 twist here, turn it again. So we have that double twist. I have a separate video that's just this cast on if you want to see it even closer up. And snug it up. I have 10 total, so I'm going to do 5, and then I'm going to stop and put on a marker before I do my other 5. And when I say pull it, you want to pull it just till you feel some resistance. You don't want it super tight. Like with any stitches, you want a bit of room in there. All right, so there's 5, and it's pretty easy to tell which ones are the cast on stitch because they don't have anything underneath them. So I'm going to take one of my markers, put it on here. This is a side, in quotes, seam marker. It's where a seam would be, and I need that to do my waist shaping later. And again, double twisted loop cast on. You can use a different cast on. Often people do a knitted cast on or a cable cast on, but I find that they take a bit more time. You have to turn the work around and back again, which isn't a big deal, but why not skip it? But they also create a bulkier edge, and since this is eventually going to be picked up for knitting the sleeve outwards from it, I'd rather have it be kind of thin. All right, so then I've got my 10 total, the markers in the middle, and I'm ready now to keep knitting across the stitches for the back of my cardigan. And the other sleeve is going to be the same, but I'll go ahead and show it because sometimes the repetition helps it make more sense. One major benefit to knitting or crocheting seamless sweaters from the top down is that you can try them on to test for fit. I would wait till you're at least a few rows past what I'll be showing here, just so you have a little bit of the body fabric, but it can be a good time to pause and just make sure everything fits nicely, keeping in mind that sometimes things change when you block them, but hopefully you block your swatch already so you know if your yarn gets, a little bit looser and more relaxed when you block it, or if it kind of poofs up and feels a bit denser when you block it. I always end up making mistakes in these videos because I'm not looking at my work as much as I normally do. I'm looking at the intake screen, but you can see they don't slow me down that much, and I have quite a few videos and a whole virtual class on fixing mistakes. The goal as you get better is not to not make mistakes at all, but to know how to fix them and not freak out when they happen. All right, so here we are at my next marker. So this next group of stitches is for my sleeve. That marker can go away. I'm going to thread up my other piece of scrap yarn for a holder. And just like before, this group of stitches is going to get slipped purlwise onto the needle. Purlwise, I just go in as if it was a knitting needle and I was going to purl and move it over. The reason for that is if I were to slip knitwise, the stitch would move over, but it would also give a half turn, and I'd end up with a twisted stitch, which you do not want. One twisted stitch isn't a big deal, but a whole row of them, even in a segment, is going to be less elastic and visibly noticeable. So when in doubt, when not otherwise specified, slip purlwise, and then things will work out nicely. I don't always put these markers on and count in advance. Sometimes I do it on the fly, but I knew for a video I'd really not be able to track that while I'm doing so many other things at the same time. And they can be helpful to just to set yourself up for having this row be a little easier, especially if it's your first time doing it. So my sleeve stitches are on the holder. I'm going to tie this scrap yarn way out at the ends. There we go. And then I'm ready to do my double twisted loop cast on. 10 stitches with a marker in the middle. A little bit of yarn out. So again, twist, 1 crossing, twist, 2 crossings, ready to put it on. You can do a single twist, which is called a backwards loop cast on or an E-wrap cast on. I don't love it because it has less structure, so it's easier for the stitches to drop and unravel themselves on your next row, and also it tends to get tighter and tighter as you work across them. So adding that second twist is really very helpful. There's half my stitches, we'll put a marker on. And then we're ready to knit across the stitches for the sweater front. Now this is a pretty exciting part in a top-down sweater because you'll see it suddenly starts looking like a sweater, whereas before it just looked like a big chunk of fabric and was hard to tell how it was going to go on the body. But now that we've created holes for arms, it just suddenly makes a lot more sense to us what it's going to be. And as you do your next row, you'll just, in this case, it'd be purling across, but whatever your pattern is. You don't really have to do anything fancy, but just slow down as you go to work across these cast-on stitches because, you know, they're a little bit less structured than stitches that have lots of rows underneath them. So now you can see there's an armhole, so this now makes a whole lot more sense as a sweater. So this would be, I'd be putting my arm in from here, my head's up there, my head's a pretty ball yarn, and the arm would be going out like that. And then I'm ready now to keep knitting down for the body of my sweater, which will keep going down here. And then eventually I'll come back and put these stitches from the holder onto double pointed needles. I'll pick up stitches along this open edge here, and then I'll knit my sleeves out. So I'll record another video for that when I'm at that point in the process. I hope this is helpful.